If you start art late, it can sometimes feel like you've already failed before you've even begun. You scroll through social media, see other younger artists drawing like gods, and can't help but compare yourself. And that voice in your head goes, "It's too late. I don't have the talent." And with AI art everywhere, what's even the point now? And it completely destroys your motivation. But as someone who started art late myself, learning it only after graduating uni, and still being able to reach a professional level and work with various companies and win awards, I realized that starting art late isn't actually a disadvantage. In fact, it can be one of your biggest strengths. And in this video, I'll explain why the fears you have about starting late are actually just common misconceptions, and show you the advantages you have because you started late. By the way, if you're new here, hey, I'm Ori, and on this channel, I make videos that explore how to improve both our art and ourselves. Also, quick thanks to Printful for kindly sponsoring today's video. If you want to turn your art into high quality merch you can sell without having to worry about upfront costs, check out the link below. So, for a long time, one of the biggest fears I had was that I started too late. Everywhere on the internet, I'd see artists who were not only way better than me, but who also started way earlier. And it made me wonder if there was even a point in me learning art. For example, Pixiv holds these illustration contests for high schoolers, and I remember seeing the winning entries back in the day and thinking, my god, these kids are way younger and already draw like pros. Meanwhile, my drawings look like they got hit by a bus and were ready to be reincarnated into another world. I also remember reading that you learn faster when you're younger. So what chance did I even have? Felt like I started way too late to get good at drawing, way too late to become an artist. And honestly, I carried this fear with me for years. It wasn't until later, after I'd actually made it as an artist and spent a lot of time understanding how learning works, that I realized the truth was completely different from what I believed. First of all, art is not like sport. In sport, your physical abilities peak when you're young, and there's a real biological clock working against you. But art works differently. It's mostly a mental skill. Which brings up the question, do our brains also have a clock counting down against us that makes us worse at learning art the older we get? Thankfully, science has the answer to this, and there's actually been a lot of research done on the subject. It turns out our brain's ability to rewire and learn is called neuroplasticity. And research has clearly shown that our brains remain plastic even as we get older. In other words, we can learn skills like drawing no matter how old we get. Now, you might be wondering, but don't younger people just learn faster? And with some things like languages, there's actually some truth to that. There is an early window in our lives where it's easier to get a native-like accent and feel for the grammar. But when it comes to skills that involve fine motor control and hand-eye coordination, which is closer to drawing than languages are, research shows that older teens and adults can learn just as fast as kids, and sometimes even faster, especially when the practice is focused and deliberate. There's also a study showing that people in their 60s to 80s who learn drawing for the first time can make big improvement in just a few weeks. So with art, you're not locked out just because you didn't start as a kid. When I first decided to take art seriously, I spent 4.5 months pouring my heart out and drawing this manga I thought was awesome. And the result was so bad that when I showed it to my friends, they laughed and said it looked like a B-rate manga. But I decided to keep on going and practicing anyway, and over time, my art improved. Because what I've found through my journey and from talking with other artists is that improvement in art isn't determined by your age. Instead, what really matters is the time and effort you put in, how consistently you show up, and how you practice. Yes, younger artists might have a head start. And it's true that when you're older, your time might be more limited because of work, study, or family. But that doesn't mean it's too late, or that your brain can't learn to draw well. And if you stay consistent, even drawing just a little bit each day, you'll be shocked at how much you can improve in a single year. Another big fear a lot of people who start art late have is this idea that they just aren't talented. Now, talent is a word that I honestly have mixed feelings about sometimes. Once in a while, I get comments on my art like, "You're so talented," and I definitely appreciate the kind compliment. But it also reminds me how invisible the journey really is. Because people tend to only see the final result, not the years of practice and hundreds of terrible drawings behind them. So it's really easy to come to the conclusion that some people, especially if they happen to be younger than us, were simply born gifted in some way. Early on in my art journey, I couldn't help but feel that way too every time I saw the amazing art the artists I looked up to were creating. So I realized that I had to make the invisible visible, and made it a habit to look at the oldest art posted by the artists I admired, the first drawings they ever uploaded. In doing so, I discovered that basically all of them also started with imperfect, messy beginner art, where they were still trying to figure things out, just like the rest of us. And for many of them, it took years before they reached a really high skill level and had their big breakthrough as an artist. Doing this really helped put things into perspective for me. And whenever I got frustrated at the slow progress I was making, I was able to remind myself that improvement simply takes time. Also, there's actually research done on hundreds of art students that found that IQ, personality, and even how vividly you can visualize things didn't predict who was good at drawing. The students who were better turned out to be the ones who spent more time drawing, used more techniques, and had a more strategic approach to learning. So what I found is, if there is such a thing as natural talent, the closest thing to it is resonance. Some people are naturally drawn to drawing, and even if they don't always find it fun, they find that putting in the hours feels meaningful, and the overall process is satisfying in some way. So they don't mind practicing and even learn to enjoy it. Over time, that naturally builds up their skill level. But even then, resonance is actually something we can also build up. Think about games. We find games we're pretty good at to be fun, but if we really suck at it and get completely destroyed every single time we play, chances are we won't enjoy it and we won't want to play again. In the same way, we naturally like things we're good at. The more we practice, the better we get. The better we get, the more we enjoy it. And the more we enjoy it, the easier it feels to keep practicing. And this positive cycle continues to build up. So the reality is, nobody is born with a brush in their hand or a 24-inch LCD drawing tablet suddenly able to draw well. Great artists are built through time, repetition, and the right kind of practice. And the good news is, practice is something you can control. Now, if you're wondering how to actually practice in the right way, I'll soon be releasing my course where I'll walk you step by step through the fastest way to learn anime art, cutting out all the wasted time and giving you clear lessons and quests that actually help you improve. It's called the Anime Art Accelerator, and it's designed especially for beginner and intermediate artists who want to speed up their progress. So if you want to be the first to know when it's ready, you can join the waiting list through the link in the description. The third big fear that a lot of people who start art late have is the feeling that AI has already made learning art pointless. AI is definitely a big ongoing concern for all of us here in the art community. And particularly, if you're someone that's starting or started art late in this day and age, at a glance, what AI can spit out in a couple seconds looks way better than what you can draw early on in your art journey. Of course, if you look closer, you start to notice that the details are messed up in some way. But it's still enough to be demotivating and feel like the deck is completely stacked against you. I definitely understand what it feels like, because I also had a similar concern when AI art started becoming a big thing, as at the time I was still very much an unknown artist that hadn't made it yet. I started seeing AI art everywhere on social media, and I remember sitting there one night thinking, Man, did all those years I spent learning to draw just become meaningless? Is it no longer possible for me to achieve my goal of becoming a professional artist? And I felt an intense mix of anxiety, fear, frustration, and unfairness. But despite carrying all that uncertainty inside, I decided to keep on going anyway. And thankfully, I still managed to break through and find my way as an artist. Looking back, there are two big realizations that I had. First, AI art is kind of like fake jewelry. At a quick glance, it can look dazzling and impressive. But the moment people realize it isn't the real thing, a lot of the value and respect disappears. One of the biggest reasons for that, I think, is because across all countries and cultures, we, as humans, intuitively respect things that took time, skill, and effort to create. And when something is obviously made by AI, people know the person behind it didn't really do the work, and so respect is lost in the process. In fact, there's even research that found that when people thought a human made a painting, they rated it as more beautiful, more meaningful, and even said they'd pay more money for it. They also felt like it had more story and effort behind it. But when they were told it was made by AI, their ratings dropped, even when the image being shown was exactly the same. So just knowing there's a human being behind the work literally changes how much people value and respect it. The second realization I had is that humans are drawn to other humans. A good example of this is chess. Right now, AI is far stronger than any human chess player. And if people only cared about performance and the end result, then chess as a sport would pretty much just be AIs playing against each other. But that's not what people are interested in. In fact, chess is thriving on YouTube and Twitch, and people are watching human players. They follow their favorite streamers and grandmasters. They care about their personalities and stories, their mistakes, big wins, blunders, and rivalries. Because at the end of the day, we're drawn to other humans because we can relate to them. We can feel their struggles and emotions, and we respect the hard work they've put in and what they stand for. I think there's a lot of truth in that for art as well. We're already seeing this in how audiences react when big companies use AI art to cut corners. People get upset. It feels cheap, low effort, and disrespectful to both the players who spent their money on the game and the artists the studio could have hired. On the other hand, when a game or project proudly uses human-made art, people often see that as a plus. It feels more premium, effortful, and higher quality. And at the end of the day, although people do support artists for their art, the art isn't just technical execution. It's a blend of skill and artistic taste that comes from your unique human elements, your personality, experiences, and preferences. So I think there will always be value in human-made art, and it may even become more valuable as the human element becomes a premium in a world of AI. By the way, if you're enjoying the video, I hope you consider subscribing to the channel so you don't miss out when I make a new one. Now that we've addressed the big fears and misconceptions, let's go through the 2 core advantages you have because you started art late. The first one is the outsider advantage. In psychology, there is a phenomenon called the Einstein effect. Simply put, this is when every time you're faced with a problem, your brain gets stuck using a familiar solution that worked before, even when a better or simpler one exists. Specialists, people who spent their whole life in a single narrow field, are especially vulnerable to this. They've been solving similar problems the same way for years, so when a new problem appears, their first instinct is to just reach for the same old solution on autopilot. This affects artists too. Just like any field, in art, a handful of styles and methods become the most popular and turn into the dominant model of what success looks like. And for good reason too. They've clearly shown that they work, so there's a lot to learn from them. And most of the time, studying what makes them work is exactly what you should do in order to improve quickly. However, if everyone starts defaulting to those successful styles as the answer to everything, without ever taking the risk to experiment or try new approaches and create new styles that might also work or even be better, then the whole space slowly starts to become stale and everything begins to look and feel very similar. This is where outsiders come in. Research consistently shows that people who come from different fields or backgrounds and seen and done different things are often better at solving problems from unexpected angles and coming up with original ideas than people who've only done one thing all their lives. A good example of this from history is Thomas Edison, one of the most famous and prolific inventors in history. He didn't grow up rich, and by the age of 12, he was already working on trains as a newsboy to earn money. So he didn't have a fancy education or an elite background in science or engineering. Instead, he learned through reading obsessively, wanting experiments and real-world experience. And over about 10 years, he basically gave himself his own education. Because he was an outsider, his mind wasn't boxed in by one rigid school of thought like a lot of the formally trained specialists were. And that became his advantage. When he faced a problem, he approached it fresh, pulled in ideas from different places, and came up with novel solutions and inventions that literally changed the world we live in. The same principle applies to people who start out late. You might be later to the drawing part, but you're not starting from zero. You've seen other problems, other ways of thinking. You've worked with different kinds of people, and you can bring those unique influences and experiences into your art journey and experiment, mix ideas, and try weird combinations. You're able to connect dots that someone who's only done art all their lives might not even see, which is exactly where a lot of originality comes from. All of this actually ties into something called your unfair advantage. The idea comes from a book of the same name where the authors talk about how everyone has a unique mix of advantages that other people can't easily copy. You can figure out your unfair advantage using the Miles framework. The first is M, which stands for money, and this is about the resources you have access to. Maybe you're able to get high-quality drawing equipment, or invest in books and courses. Or perhaps you can take some time off to practice more. Or you simply have more free time available because you're younger and don't have many responsibilities yet. The next is I, which stands for intelligence and insights. This is about your book smarts, street smarts, people skills, and creativity. Maybe you're good at understanding and analyzing what works and why, or staying on top of trends and what resonates with people. The next is L, which stands for location and luck. These are things like where you live, who you're surrounded by, or random opportunities you've stumbled into. Maybe you're near a convention scene, have artist friends, or happen to know someone in the industry who can help you out. The next is E, which stands for education and expertise. This is about what you already know and have learned before. Your previous career, degree, or long-term hobbies. All of that gives you a mix of knowledge and perspectives others don't have. And the last is S, which stands for status. This is about your social and inner status. Social status are things like your network, reputation, credibility, or any community you've already built. Maybe people already trust you in another field, or you've built an audience somewhere else that you can bring into your art. Inner status, on the other hand, is about things like having confidence in yourself and high self-esteem, which are also advantages. To use myself as an example, the unfair advantage I had when starting art mainly came from the education and expertise side, having studied teaching and Japanese in uni. At the time, it definitely didn't feel related to art at all. If anything, I honestly thought that I'd wasted all those years. But looking back now, those things ended up becoming a huge part of what made me unique. Because of my teaching background, when I started learning art, I approached it through the lens of a teacher and kept asking myself, what is the most effective way to learn this? How do I improve in the fastest way possible? So instead of just drawing randomly and hoping to improve, I created a learning plan for myself, combining what I knew about learning efficiently based on the science, plus lots of trial and error. And this helped me improve faster. On top of that, being able to speak Japanese meant I could also learn from Japanese resources, which was really important because when I first started, there was very little high-quality English material on learning anime art. And later on, it also meant that I could reach Japanese audiences and work with Japanese companies more smoothly. The point is, we all have some of these unfair advantages that's very hard for anyone else to copy, especially not in the exact way and combination that we have them. Which is why one of the best strategies as an artist, especially if you started late, is to aim not to be the best, but to be the only. Because by blending your past experiences, skills, and personality with your approach to art, you end up becoming the only person who create what you create in a way that only you can. And that's exactly what helps you and your art stand out. Now that you know your advantages, the next step is actually using it. These days, you don't just have to keep your art in your sketchbook. You can literally bring your ideas and your tastes as an artist to life in the real world as actual products, without having to pour lots of money or time into creating it by using a platform like Printful, who's kindly sponsoring today's video. They let you turn your art into high-quality merch, and because they're print on demand, the product is only made after someone actually buys it, which means there are no risks or upfront costs for you. The way it works is simple. First, head over to their website and pick the type of product you want to create. It could be prints, posters, clothing, hoodies, accessories, mugs, phone cases. There's a lot to choose from. Then you just upload your artwork and customize the design until you're happy with how it looks. After that, you just connect Printful to your online shop. If you don't have one yet, you can set one up for free on a site like StoreNV. And if you already do, they integrate with all the major platforms like Etsy, Shopify, TikTok Shop, and more. Once that's set up, your merch is live. And whenever someone places an order, Printful will automatically print it, pack it, and ship it straight to your customer, so you can just focus on drawing and creating. They're also known for their high product quality, and some of the world's biggest brands like Coca-Cola, Spotify, and MTV use Printful, which means as an independent artist, you get that same level of quality and service behind your products. They've also got fulfillment centers all over the world, so you can sell internationally and avoid extra fees. And if you want to go the extra mile with your brand, you can add personal touches like insert cards or custom messages to make your orders feel more personal and special for your supporters. So if you want to start bringing your art to life as real products in the world, you can check Printful out through the link in the description. Okay, we've talked about why starting art late isn't a disadvantage and how it actually makes you have strengths that others don't. But the next big question is, how do you actually practice in a way that makes you improve fast? Because a lot of artists do put in the hours, but they're accidentally following myths and bad advice that keeps them stuck, even when they're working hard. Which is why I made this video, where I break down the 5 common myths that hold artists back, and the rules you should follow instead to quickly improve and finally get good at art. This was Ori. Thanks so much for watching all the way to the end, and I'll catch you in the next video. Bye!